Hey guys, today we're going to talk about texture. When somebody's color grading a video, most of the time the only thing they think about is color and maybe some grain. But film, 35 millimeter film, had a different texture, a different way of showing details. This is something that nobody is showing on YouTube on how to do. So here's I have a shot from To Catch a Thief from 1958, shot in Technicolor. And as you can see, there's a lot of texture on the face, on whatever they wear, and that texture is actually what we call thick details, not thin details. I'll show you later what a thin detail is. But everything seems like it's actually soft, but it gives the illusion of being very detailed. In reality, film is not actually detailed. So let's see now some very common modern 35 millimeter film. So it looks a lot more digital, in fact, because film has seen a lot of progress through the years, so it is actually more accurate. Back then, Technicolor looks very pleasing, but it was not actually accurate. So this is how it looks. As you can see, it's very soft. So whoever is trying to get the sharpest and more megapixels cameras, I don't think they're doing the right thing if they actually want the true film look. So you can see here the texture on the actual skin. It's very interesting, soft, but it gives the illusion of detail. I'm gonna have a few more samples here, and then we're gonna try to check some footage that I have. You can see the hair is actually, if you see if you shoot that in digital, you see every single strand of hair. Here you only have the illusion of hair, pretty much the same trick like painters have when they actually paint. They give the illusion that there is a lot of detail while there is actually not much of it. And you can see here the skin. And I love this shot here because it shows actually how film has this very different texture to it. So let's go to resolve, and I have here quite a few clips. I got some from Reds, from Ari, and also from Blackmagic, BMPCC 4K. So here we have Red. I have the same color graded, the same clip twice. Once color graded, but once with the texture and once without the texture. So the colors are exactly the same. We're not looking at colors here. We only look about texture. So I'll show you the before and after. I'm gonna go full screen on some of them, so you can see. So with the texture, without the texture, with the texture, without the texture. So as you can see, this is a very digital image that you can see here. You can see the head of the hand here, while here it just looks more like a painting somehow. This is an anamorphic Ari. Another one, this is color graded with a texture. Here's without the texture. This is my favorite example because here you can see it looks like a 1980s film somehow. And here is without the texture. It's the exact same grading, but without the texture here. And here's with the BMPCC 4K with the texture, without the texture. So here it's very visible how truly digital it looks without the texture. And when you have that texture put in, you really give definition, let's say, not detail, but definition to things. So let's go see how I did that. So in the first few nodes, I simply have the regular color grading, LUTs, whatever, what have you. You can grade that any way you want in terms of color, but but all those here, the other 6 nodes are all about texture and nothing else. And it's not just grain. Grain doesn't do a lot. So the first thing we have to do is to soften it. First we're going to soften it, and then we're going to sharpen it. That's exactly the trick. First you soften it, you only keep the important, thick, very, very visible details. You get rid of all the small details, and then you actually sharpen those details that are left in order to get that thick detail. I mean, there's no word for it, but we call it thick details. All right, so on the first node of the actual texture, I have a Gaussian blur here with 0, 1, 25 only on one side. You don't want blurred on both sides. You want it on one side because you want to also have that look of vintage lenses, that they were not very good, or if you might want to also give the impression that this was shot anamorphically, even if it wasn't, because the human brain is actually conditioned after seeing a lot of Hollywood movies shot anamorphically to think that this is the cinematic look. It doesn't matter if it's actually not correct or photographically perfect. It's what we're conditioned after watching movies for decades. So we will use Gaussian blur on one side here, one strength. And also on some of those clips I will have some blurriness. We're going to see it in a few others. Because here it was not actually very sharp to begin with. That's why I didn't blur it. And then we go to the next one. Here we have a lens blur. I'm using a 125 blur size with anamorphism all the way jacked up and blended 0.5 50% strength. Then the next one is contrast pop 0.50. Pretty much 0.050. Everything else is default. Then we have sharpen edges default, but then I blend it at 0.5. Then we have soften and sharpen. This one is interesting. This one does a lot of things. I'm turning on and off. You can probably see it. You have to change the numbers to those numbers as you see here, and then I have grain. You can copy those numbers. You have the grain aspect ratio to anamorphic as well, and you can copy from here the rest of the numbers. So I'm gonna go full screen now, and I'm going to see with the texture, without the texture, with the texture, without the texture. As you can see, it does quite a few, has quite a few differences, especially on a sharp sensor like a Sony sensor as on the BMPCC 4K. And that's it. I mean, if you like to see how it looks like simply without the grain, if you think, oh, it's just the grain, well, here it is. I just removed the grain. It didn't remove the texture. It didn't remove those thick details, as we call it. So it's not just the grain. It's a lot of other work that it has to be done. So I hope I convinced you, because a lot of YouTube videos, like a lot of people are having BMPCC 4K and they record something like this and they upload on YouTube something like this. It doesn't say, oh, okay, here's a cinematic video, but it doesn't look like film. This looks more like film, and not only like movie film, but also photographic film. All right, so that's all I had to say for today. I hope you've seen. One more thing, I'd like to tell you one more thing about here on this node. I have, for example, here 0.55 blurriness, while on some other ones like this one, I don't have any blur radius at all. A reason being, it depends on the lens, on how it was actually shot. If you used a very modern lens that was super sharp, then you do need to blur. You can go all the way from 0.53 to 0.55 to blur it up. If you use the vintage lenses, like I did here, I only used it up to 0.52. And if you have like a less sharp sensor, a less high resolution, you can not sharp at all. You don't have to blur at all. So it depends how you shot. So it's not just, oh, you copy all the numbers, it's the same numbers for all the kinds of sensors and all the kinds of lenses. That's not true. It depends how you shot. All right, I think that's all I have to say. I hope I convinced you. I hope you'd like to see your examples. See you next time.